I have lived in the West for quite a while now. I moved to the West in 1989, and before that I grew up in India, and particularly in the Tibetan, traditional Tibetan society, and as a monk. And one of the things that really struck me about the contemporary life in kind of more materially affluent society like the West is how pervasive the feeling of stress is. Now, that I live in Montreal and live like many other people living in a kind of a highly stressed society, I know stress is a major issue and is at the forefront of consciousness of almost everybody that I know. Parents talk about the stress of bringing up children. People talk about stress at work. People talk about stress in terms of their relationship. So stress is something that we hear everywhere, and we hear about programs that are offering stress management. People are trying out mindfulness and yoga so that they can learn a little bit of skill to be able to deal with their stress. And stress also has a very, very negative kind of press. We are constantly reminded that how stress is bad for you. It harms your health. It sort of eats away at your immune system, literally. So stress is an important topic, but one of the things about stress is that actually, purely from a scientific point of view, we cannot say stress is good or bad. One of the things that I personally find helpful is the awareness that stress is an evolved response in the face of a challenge that you face. For example, when you are confronted with a life-threatening situation, say you're walking into a forest and you are confronted with a tiger in front of you. Now, that is a truly threatening situation. So evolution has equipped us to deal with that situation. What happens is that your adrenaline kicks in, okay? Your senses become completely heightened. You're hyper-vigilant. Blood flows into your limbs to make you ready either to fight or flee. I mean, this is the classic flight and flee response kicks in. That's the role of stress. Essentially what stress is when you experience it, it's an indication to you that something very important is happening for you, something that you care about. So, and in our life, we also know that if you don't care about anything, you don't feel stressed. But stress kicks in when you are dealing with a situation where you worry about it, where you care about it. Now, where the problem of stress comes from is not so much the stress itself, but the way in which we respond to stress. When we respond to stress, we bring a kind of a feeling of heaviness, a feeling of being overwhelmed. We feel as if we're juggling so many balls at the same time, and if we don't keep our eyes constantly on the ball, that if you drop it, everything will fall apart. And we feel as if we are constantly chasing after things, and we have a sense that we're never going to catch up, and we're never going to kind of somehow rise above this. So it almost feels as if you're swimming and the tide is just sweeping you away. So that's really the pervasive feeling of stress. So the toxicity of stress really comes not so much from the stresses themselves, but the way in which we respond. Interestingly, when we experience stress, two hormones are released in our adrenaline glands. And strangely, these two hormones are almost kind of opposite. One is cortisol. Cortisol, kind of turns sugar into fat to give us more energy. But also if the cortisol is too high, it is dangerous because it kind of harms our nervous systems. And when cortisol arises, it also has the side effect of shutting down many other vital functions of the body that has to do with growth, like reproduction or digestion and so on. The other chemical has got a very fancy name which I can't pronounce, but it's referred to as DHEA, which is the kind of acronym for this. And the function of that is to actually allow growth. So it's similar to testosterone, which allows the body to grow when you do physical exercise. This particular chemical DHEA, when it is released, allows the brain to grow. So stress in itself, you can see that there is a kind of a fine balance between these two chemicals that allow us to respond to the challenging situation. Now, earlier I said that it is not so much stress that is the problem, but actually our response to the stresses that really is the problem. Now here, one of the very interesting things that is coming out of new signs of stress, this is still being debated, the new signs of stress is that the way in which we see the stress, again mindset, the kind of mindset that we have vis-a-vis stress has a huge impact. If we see stress as negative, harmful to health and so on, that's our belief, that's our core belief, then our experience of stress can have a deleterious effect on us. If we have an attitude to stress that is not that negative, where we see stress as a kind of an indication of a challenge, an opportunity to grow and so on, then stress itself doesn't seem to harm that much. There was a very interesting study that recently came out that involved about over 35,000, I think it was around 38,000 subjects. And they were asked a simple question, in the past life, how much stress did you experience in your life? And among those people who reported high level of stress that was experienced in the past year, 48% of people have died. Now the catch is the following. Among those 48% people who have died, they found out it was only among the group where the people had a negative mindset vis-a-vis stress. Those who had a positive mindset vis-a-vis stress, even though they had experienced the same amount of stress, they did not observe this negative effect. So clearly our mindset seems to make a big difference. Whether you see stress as a kind of exclusively, entirely bad thing that somehow you need to suppress, or whether you see stress as an opportunity, as a challenge.